If many women are complaining about it, then many must be experiencing it. However, do you feel the article misses anything? What is your experience? Story 1. Every narrative has a loud voice, making it hard to know if there is consensus or if different groups are shouting over each other. Men do not open up. Men are using me as a therapist. Male friendships are toxic. Men have no friends. He spends too much time with his friends compared to me. He spends too much time with me, and it is suffocating. Likewise, with whatever women times sentiment is headlining on a given day. Story 2. I think people somehow got it twisted that it is a therapist's job to take care of people's emotional needs and not their community or loved ones. The world seems cold. Story 3. The bare minimum describes the emotional labor men need to do in heterosexual relationships. It goes beyond remembering birthdays or coordinating social plans. It means being your partner's sole support system, managing her stress, interpreting her moods, and holding her hand through feelings she won't share with anyone else. That is how the article would read if you flipped the genders. As an anecdote, I was married for about 5 years to a woman with clinical depression who used me as her sole emotional support system. I did so without complaint through talking about feelings, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, and even getting her temporarily voluntarily committed when things were really bad. In return, she asked me not to share any of my thoughts or feelings on the things I cared deeply about: politics, social issues, values, and religion, because that stressed her out. Story 4. My experience is that women criticize and pick apart every male friend you have to make sure you would choose her over them. They do the same with your hobbies. Too expensive, too dirty, too many bugs, boring, or taking too much time. They ask why every weekend. Once they have driven you away from your friends and hobbies, they complain about shouldering a fraction of the burden that they refuse to let other men and safe spaces take. When you try to talk to them for 15 minutes about yourself, they say they want shared effort, even though you just spent 3 hours listening to her reenact a 4-hour event. Story 5. Men pressure their partners. Here is a newsflash for you. Men and women rely on one another to be therapists and emotional support in a relationship. It is called a relationship. If you are not doing that for your partner, and your partner is not doing that for you, you do not have a relationship. Jesus, I feel like I am living in the twilight zone. Story 6. Expecting to be a therapist and emotional support is why I am no longer with my ex. She was just too needy. Story 7. This article describes an ideal romantic relationship and portrays it as a negative concept. Story 8. You have got to be kidding. That is not a thing. The exact inverse maybe, but having this posted in a subreddit where there are 500 replies from men saying, "Do not open up to your girlfriend, it will go against you," and endless posts about, "Why will not my guy open up to me?" and so on. This is too funny. Story 9. Any man who has been in a good relationship knows that their partner would not accuse them of using them as an emotional crutch. You are supposed to be comfortable being open and honest with a partner, and that goes both ways. If it is too much for them, they can tell you, and you too can find a middle ground. I do think it is fair for someone to say they are not equipped to deal with a level of emotional trauma and that you need to get a real therapist. Story 10. I'm not going to read the article. My wife is a cancer psychiatrist who has helped me and many of my family members, including my ex and her husband, in a very real and often transformational way. I don't force her to be my therapist. She does the work because her personal mission is to ease suffering and be of service. Thank you for everything, my love. Edit to add. She is genuinely upset when people withhold information from her. She insists on open, ongoing, and genuine conversation so she can be effective in helping me and my family. Story 11. What is strange is that when women demand emotional closeness, share trauma, expect him to be far sturdier emotionally than she is, to understand her as well as she understands herself so that she does not have to communicate or simply listen and be there instead of giving her solutions, we do not have pathologized words for that. That is just being in a relationship, people say. But being a woman's emotional support, sounding board, muse, and pillar is a full-time job. The work resembles being her unpaid therapist, but we regard it as normal. Story 12. Women. I wish he would open up to me. Same women. Oh my God. Why is he opening up to me? I'm not his emotional support. Huh? Story 13. It is always easier to externalize than internalize. At what point does "I am not his emotional crutch" become "I am not equipped to deal with my partner's emotions"? Or do we assume all women are perfectly capable of dealing with the emotions of others and that if they become overwhelmed, it means the problem is the other person? Story 14. I think anything that relies on meaningless internet buzzwords to describe the complex give and take of relationships should be taken with several grains of salt. Story 15. I remember some years ago a women's magazine or internet site wrote an article about how men should be more open and share their feelings. 1 month later, they wrote an article about how men did not know how to share their feelings, were stressing their partners, and basically blamed men by saying that sharing their feelings was bad. Story 16. That is funny because it means men expect reciprocation for what they already do for their partners, but their partners resent being expected to give back what they receive. Story 17. I am going to be at my most skeptical of women here. We are blamed for being too emotional, for not being emotional enough, for not having close friends, and for spending too much time with friends away from home. I think maybe we need to consider that some women just do not like men. And that is fine, but I could do with a little less complaining about every single way I choose to live my life. Thank you. Story 18. Female here. I don't hear this sentiment echoed at all by other women. The author mentions that only 38% of single women want a relationship and then assumes that this is because of being an emotional support. However, that is not backed up by any evidence, and no other women are quoted in the article as feeling this way. There are many studies that look at why women are staying single for longer, and I have not found a single one that even mentions this. The narrative that this author is pushing actively works against the issue by making men feel guilty for expressing their emotions. To any men reading this, please don't listen to this. I can't speak for all women, but anyone worth being in a relationship with wants you to feel safe being emotionally vulnerable with them. Story 19. The fact that women do not view the time men spend listening to them vent for hours about frustrations in their lives as emotional labor shows how ridiculous things have become. Women routinely unload all their emotional issues onto men and expect us to sit calmly and patiently, listening to everything without any reaction and without offering a solution. Yet, they cannot listen to our emotions and frustrations. This is absurd. Story 20. You lost me at article from Vice. They peddle nonsense and false information. It's like the Daily Mail for millennials. Story 21. Whenever women express concerns about this issue, remind them that men support women consistently, compassionately, and sincerely. We have progressed beyond creating meaningless terms and now prioritize allowing her to vent and making her feel heard. Story 22. Women would not stop asking men to be more open emotionally instead of facing every challenge alone in their minds. Now that the type of men they used to criticize are becoming less common, replaced by men who express their emotions as requested, every day there is another article or video of women complaining about emotional labor and questioning who will take on traditionally female roles. They say men now want special treatment for having basic expectations and desires from a partner. Story 23. Only a high-maintenance woman who thinks she contributes more than she actually does would write that. These are the type of women who yell at men for not being vulnerable enough and later throw what they shared in confidence and vulnerability back in their faces, then go right back and write nonsense like this. Story 24. This American society told men to be vulnerable and emotional. Then the same society condemns us for doing so. After 42 years of life, I am back to the default. Clam up and put up. Story 25. I'm sorry, but women have been using men for emotional support for thousands of years. We made up our own term for it long ago. We call it being her emotional tampon. If you don't do it, you will be labeled as a neglectful abuser, and 98% of Reddit will tell her to break up with you. Story 26. Before all this, every woman's type was the strong, silent type. It wasn't called emotional labor, though. It was just expected of a man to listen and manage his partner's emotions, worries, fears, work issues, friendship issues, and so on. She talks for hours about what's on her mind. He listens as a man is supposed to. Strong, silent type. Allows her space to be soft and lean on him. Then we realized mental health issues were a thing after men started killing themselves and or drinking and drugging themselves to death because they had no space to speak. Then it was said, men don't talk to their partners and men are to blame for telling other men it's not manly to do so, completely ignoring the fact that it was them who rewarded this particular brand of toxic masculinity and openly encouraged and promoted it. Then men wanted to talk to their partners. It was a relief that the messaging had changed, but then it was called emotional labor, and it's not my job to be your therapist. All this despite men being expected to be their partner's emotional rock since time immemorial, and still adhering to the strong, silent type archetype despite not saying it out loud anymore because we needed to pretend to care about men being open and vulnerable. I don't want you to fix it. I just want to be heard type of thing. It's a classic double bind. Triple binding with a side of hypocrisy even. We need to stop listening to these professional gender grievance vendors. It's literally their job to ensure that the genders stay mad at each other so they come up with falsehoods to ensure we all are. There is money and social influence to be had by continuously pushing the one-sided messaging, saying men are bad people, and this is a great example. They're bad for not doing things, then they're bad for doing things, all despite women being expected to be able to do things freely forever. If we all got along, they'd have nothing to write about. That's not to say there aren't genuine issues along gender lines, but this is nonsense. Story 27. I would say this is almost completely false. I am sure there is some truth to it somewhere. I am sure someone has experienced this. However, in my experience, it is usually mostly the opposite. I am responsible for managing a woman's volatile emotional state, and I handle my own problems alone. Story 28. That's fine if women do not want men to open up, but they cannot also complain about men not opening up or opening up while in a relationship. It sounds like emotionally immature women. Also, it goes both ways. Men can say that women do the same thing. A lot of men understand that to grow together, one has to actually talk about things deeper than traffic or the weather. Story 29. I dislike the term emotional labor. Notice how no one ever talks about bill-paying labor or protection labor or home maintenance labor or planning and paying for vacations labor. Story 30. Some men have started opening up more, which is good. However, too often, that openness is shared with the person they are sleeping with instead of a friend or a therapist. Vulnerability without boundaries can feel more like a burden than a breakthrough. What is the point of a spouse? Story 31. How is it not both men and women in roughly equal numbers who do that? There are many broken people in the world. It is not limited to one gender. Story 32. I believe these women expect their emotional needs to be met during a relationship and consider men expressing their emotions elsewhere as emotional cheating. Story 33. Force? I'm sorry, are men chaining women to radiators before sharing their trauma? If she does not want to be emotionally supportive or thinks the man's issues are too much for her, there is the door. Story 34. Men are not asking to have live-in therapists. They are asking to be treated as emotional equals, which in most cases they are not in relationships. If you cannot be emotionally open without fear of reprisal or making it about your significant other, then why have one? This goes both ways. But of course, it is vice. They almost intentionally find the most hack writer detached from reality to cover the story. As for their study, it is from Stanford, the institution that gave us the Stanford prison experiment that went off the rails, and the same institution that had 2 tenured resident professors be accomplices to their son who committed one of the largest financial scams ever. Story 35. I'm sorry to hear you're struggling, but I can't assist with that request. Story 36. Whenever you think something or someone is ruining your life, it is you. A victim mentality is very debilitating. Story 37. Vice became irrelevant a long time ago. I really do not care about the nonsense feminist content they are trying to publish on the internet. I will not be clicking on that link or giving that site any traffic. Story 38. If women are smart enough to identify man-keeping and also smart enough to lead society, then they need to come up with solutions. They could step away from all men, or they could use their higher emotional skills and empathy to help find solutions. Personally, I prefer the phrase emotional skill gap instead of man-keeping, which I find rooted in misandrist attitudes. Emotional skill gap reframes it as an educational and parenting issue and something society ought to address. Man-keeping seems more like complaining and venting about a problem in a way that isn't very emotionally mature or likely to elicit a positive response from men. Story 39. There is a difference between letting your significant other know about your hardships and dumping everything on your significant other and no one else. Women who have 10 close friends can offload 1/10 of their heavy emotional stressors to each friend and have a happy relationship. A friendship or romantic relationship is more than just, here are all my problems. When a friend calls you only when they are having a rough time, you associate the time speaking with them as only their hardships, and that becomes taxing and stressful. That friendship will not last. So when men only offload their emotional stressors to their significant other and not share the burden with their own friends, their significant other associates them as heavy topics only time. This is what makes the relationship unbalanced and exhausting over time. A good rule of thumb is that for every one big thing that went wrong today, share 3 small things that went right today. All the other things that went wrong should be shared equally among your friends. When you come back to your significant other, you can say, I had issues with X, Y, and Z. I don't know how I'm going to solve them yet, but after talking it out with my friends, I will seek out A and B. Please stay by my side as I work through it. This way, your significant other doesn't have to regulate or be the sole person responsible as your accountability. Story 40. Frustrating article. It basically absolves women of any responsibility. They have had enough. It is not bitterness. It is protection. Women want to love, not to be life coaches. More men are opening up. That is great. But it should be with men and therapists, not a partner. I knew that stupid man-keeping Guardian article would be referenced. For a long time, society taught men to suppress and be numb. Now, apparently it is fine, but not too much. What especially annoys me is if we flip the genders. Say a partner wanted to vent and you said, Sweetheart, this is for your girlfriends or therapist. I do not want to hear it. It is not my responsibility. Would not that be labeled as dismissive? Condescending? I will bet money the majority of people writing and reading this are women. I sound like a misogynist. Every article that has a stance, a bias, will swing toward the idea of what men are doing wrong. The advice is mixed, often conflicting with itself. At this point, I would absolutely talk to my friends more because it sounds like they would actually seem to care. But to me, that is kind of sad. Story 41. When women say they want a sensitive man, they mean a man sensitive to their needs. Women often expect men to handle a lot of emotional labor. For example, getting upset when the man tries to solve problems instead of just listening to her vent. Every time she cries, it illustrates this expectation. No one is emotionally fulfilled when a partner breaks down into tears over everything. However, this is seen as completely normal unless a man does it. Story 42. I did not read the article, but I am willing to bet that it does not mention women requiring their boyfriends to listen to every emotion they wish to express. I have never encountered or heard of a relationship where the man does not support his girlfriend in this way. However, asking for reciprocation is apparently considered wrong. Story 43. I think it discourages men from connecting with their partners. What is the point of being punished for sharing? It is a good way to determine a red flag because if she does not want me to open up, that is not going to be healthy. Story 44. The text appears to describe a study that had a conclusion and then sought ways to support it. Similar results could likely be found by applying the study to many different groups. The inflammatory aspect is the interchangeable group targeted for criticism, which invalidates the article as a serious examination of the subject. Examples include, what do you think about this article about how Eskimos force their partners to be their therapists? What do you think about this article about how wolf-based furry fans force their partners to be their therapists? What do you think about this article about how Asian wheat farmers force their partners to be their therapists? What do you think about this article about how Pokemon Go players force their partners to be their therapists? This assigns a universal trait to a gender, race, or other group. It is dishonest and reductive at its core. Such claims cannot be proven and fail when examined on an individual level every time. Story 45. That is the job. Just as a woman would not hesitate about a man's role in protecting her from danger. Story 46. I think it is definitely helpful for anyone to have more than one person to go to for emotional support or to vent to. It is a lot for one person to carry. I also think it is true that the average woman is better at maintaining those relationships than the average man. So I can certainly understand where the article is coming from, even if it is a bit of a shallow piece on the subject. Tracing the links back to where the quotes come from is much more interesting. People need friends to both look after themselves and to maintain healthy relationships with their romantic partners. Women are doing that at a higher rate than men. The main idea is really only the start of the conversation. Story 47. I wonder if it mentions how much women overstep and try to take on the therapist role without anyone asking or forcing them to. Story 48. So, does that mean women force their partners to be their protector and physical shield? Leave it alone and relax. Story 49. It means being your partner's sole support system. Managing his stress, interpreting his moods, and holding his hand through feelings he won't share with anyone else. All of it unpaid, unacknowledged, and often unreciprocated. This goes both ways. Men are less likely to share with a friend or parent the way most women do, but men in heterosexual relationships absolutely have to do these things for their partner as well. Now, notice how they say unpaid? We'll come back to that. Some women are called bitter for stepping back from dating. Others are labeled cold. What they're really doing is protecting their capacity. The choice to stay single rarely comes from defeat. It comes from knowing exactly how much energy they have left to give. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real point here. We're all burned out. Men struggle with feeling lonely, only valued for their ability to financially support a spouse and children, while women, who are also expected to hold full-time careers, feel like they are doing too much emotional work in their relationships and are also burning out. Capitalism is the answer. We're all slowly dying in misery because we have to devote every last drop of energy to the grind. So much so that we can't even invest in a cooperative, reciprocal relationship. We just need someone to unload on. Story 50. My spouse did this with me. I hit a rough patch at work and was trying to think through how to handle it. And she lost her temper and said, "I can't do this. Go talk to a therapist." Mind you, she did the same thing less than a year ago, and I listened and gave her feedback. Story 51. I have heard that women lose attraction when they see their partner open up and show emotions, considering it a sign of weakness. Then people wonder why the trend is to be stoic and not open up. I have found that your male friends are much better in that regard. Story 52. I think this is something that both women and men do to their partners, but it has been unfairly labeled as something only men do. Story 53. My wife has anxiety about many things, so I try to keep my misery and depression to myself. It is going very terrible. Story 54. Plenty of women are no longer interested in that dynamic. According to Pew Research Center, only 38% of single women in the United States are currently looking for a relationship. Among single men, that number increases to 61%. The gap reveals a lot. Women are not opting out of love. They are opting out of being someone's therapist with benefits. This shift in logic is interesting. Did you ask women why they are opting out? You heard of this new term man-keeping and assumed that was why women are not dating. That assumption is irresponsible. Did you survey men with male friends about how often they share their mental problems? Jumping to conclusions causes more harm than good. I have sisters-in-law who rotate through partners, and I have not heard them say that mental baggage influenced who they stayed with, much less whether they shared it or not. My wife and I have been together much longer than any of her siblings have with their partners, and I would argue it is because we actually talk about our emotions. My wife does not get put off when I express my feelings. She appreciates it and understands me more, just as I do with her. This article is just rage bait built on a false premise. Story 55. The article is pure projection. Women often use men as emotional outlets and expect them to remain composed. Story 56. 2 decades of diminishing men, and here we are. Now share the article where women want men to share more and be emotionally available. I remember my ex-fiancée used to always say, "How come you never cry?" I am always the one crying. Then one day my eyes got watery, and she said, "Oh no, no, no. Never mind. I know what I said, but forget it. I don't want to see you cry." Story 57. Happy not to. Just don't complain when I don't. I think the whole trend of wanting their partners to open up is something they believe they want because social media tells them that is what they want. Story 58. Yes, because women do not talk to men about their emotions ever. I do not think I have ever heard a man complain that he is being their therapist. In an ideal relationship, both parties can lean on each other for their emotional needs. If you do not support each other, are you even in a relationship? Story 59. Yes, no. I open up, but I do not engage in this. Why? Many women weaponize what you share. It is despicable. Story 60. That Vice article was predictably the dumbest thing on the internet today. They are obviously a failing tabloid, so they publish incendiary nonsense to get attention. They are like a toddler holding his breath until he gets his way. They are an embarrassment. This article is laughable. Story 61. Every woman that I have ever had a close relationship with, romantic, familial, or generally platonic, has used me as someone to vent to at various points. They might call it venting, bonding, or complaining, but at the end of the day, I was expected to listen, validate them, and act as their therapist for whatever issues they were dealing with. If I ever considered asking them to return the favor, they always had something else going on, or it would magically become about them, as in the case of my mother. So please excuse me if I do not take Vice very seriously on this. Edit. Actually, this is not entirely fair. My current partner does make herself available if I need to talk or vent to her. It is one of many reasons why I am with her, so I was simply wrong when I said it was every woman. Story 62. When there was talk about the devil doing evil things to create distance between people and cause harm, this nonsense is exactly what they were describing. Story 63. My girlfriend offers me emotional support, and I offer her emotional support. That is how relationships work. Story 64. Friendly reminder. You do not have to think anything about a Vice article. It is nice to discuss, but not worth getting aggravated over. Story 65. Aren't partners supposed to depend on each other emotionally? I mean, if it gets too bad, there needs to be open communication about the need for professional help. Even with professional help, a big part of healing is having a supportive social network, and your partner is usually your first point of contact. Story 66. To be honest, I thought it was the other way. I have been told that I am a great listener, and I respect their privacy. I personally do not share anything as it always comes back to me somehow. Story 67. The soft news field is dominated by women. This article reflects that perspective. There may also be some gender bias, considering it is written by Ashley Fike, who I believe is a woman. Story 68. This is my general thought. I am here to support you, listen to you, and provide perspective and advice if you ask, but I have limitations. I am not your therapist and should not be your only source for emotional comfort or guidance. I can only be a form of support for any journey you take toward growth or change. I cannot do the work for you, nor is it my responsibility to constantly remind you or keep you on track. Boundaries are important. They keep you healthy and sane. I actively apply this in my relationships with family and friends. It is difficult sometimes because it would be easier if I did it for them or walked them through it. But from experience, that rarely works and is just a temporary fix. True change or improvement must come from the person. Being someone's therapist can cause harmful power dynamics, discord, and relationship strain. My boyfriend had to learn this because he was used to not dealing with his issues, and when they were addressed, he just did as he was told or went along, which was just another form of avoidance. He did not like that. I only gave him perspective instead of direct advice. I told him it is his job and decision on what to do. He tells me he is much happier mentally and emotionally now than ever before. The personal growth I have seen in him is amazing. Story 69. Many women have challenges nowadays. They view everything, even in the context of a relationship, as labor or exploitation. Many younger women are proud of the fact that they do not know how to cook. Some of these women consider intimacy and supporting their partner as emotional labor, but then expect their partner to do the same. Also, Vice is not a reliable source. They frequently write biased and antagonistic articles. Story 70. As a seasoned relationship veteran, after a divorce and several long-term relationships in which I always gave women's opinions a valid space, I found myself agreeing more and more with the quote from the TV show Mad Men, "Who cares what women think?" I will even expand it to, "Who cares what people think?" We are surrounded by many people believing false information everywhere. I found that having a strong, rational opinion with agency tends to make people either follow and agree with you or walk away. Either way, that is a win, including in relationships. Story 71. Some women seem to mean that when they say they want an emotionally open man, they mean open for me, not the other way around. Story 72. In my experience, it has always been the opposite. My partners have always felt very comfortable venting to me about their days or things that are bothering them, sparing no detail and often going off on tangents. I have rarely been afforded the same treatment. Story 73. Romantic partners are supposed to support each other, right? What else are you in it for? All take and no give? Story 74. Studies show that men do not want to open up because they do not want to burden their partners with their issues. I feel that talk like this makes men even less likely to open up. Story 75. Yes, I used to do this and maybe it still happens occasionally. But my partner and I have done some great work in therapy to ensure emotions are not the only outlet. Men need to stop using their partners as emotional punching bags and take responsibility by engaging in talk therapy or something similar. Story 76. I disagree with the premise that if many women are complaining about it, then many must be doing it. People, in general, complain about things that are not reality. Story 77. If you are stoic and withdrawn, that is toxic masculinity. If you occasionally want to talk about your feelings with your partner like a normal person, that is you feeling entitled to their unpaid emotional labor. Story 78. I think there is a lot of truth to this, so I believe there is a valid and important point about how many men are less socialized to communicate their emotions, leading them to effectively unload their issues on their partner. However, the reverse is also true and should not be overlooked. Women using men as their support and emotional regulators. Additionally, it does not acknowledge how much women have made it unsafe for men to be vulnerable. Story 79. Yesterday, Vice published an article about how men refuse to open up to their partners. Give me a break. Vice is unreliable and specializes in reinforcing its own viewpoints. It is sad because Vice used to be really good, but those days have passed. Story 80. We are supposed to support and listen to each other in a relationship. Everything else is unimportant. Forcing their partners? Are we in kindergarten? People should grow up. Story 81. Honestly, nowadays it seems like if you are not flattering a woman, she does not want anything to do with you. I am so glad I am not single in this day and age. Story 82. Isn't this something that both genders do? Also, where is the line where providing normal emotional support to your partner turns into being their de facto therapist? In my experience, when men bring up something that is bothering them, they typically want a solution, whereas women usually just want a vent. This can make it more frustrating in the long run and more likely that I feel like their therapist. Story 83. The way women can interpret things would make me laugh if it weren't so sad. First, they keep saying it's unpaid and unreciprocated. How do men get compensated for actually paying for everything? Second, if a man is truly opening up to you that way, he feels immensely close, intimate, and has a huge amount of trust for you. Is that not what women want in a relationship? What do you want? To be my partner, but anything deeper than that needs to be handled by my friends and a therapist? That's fine, we just need to know that so we can invest in you appropriately. Story 84. Imagine thinking that your partner opening up to you and trusting you with their thoughts, feelings, and emotions is a bad thing. So, do women want men to open up to them or not? Trust them or not? Confide in them or not? Should men be upset every time a woman vents to them? Should we scorn them for using us as an emotional support when they ask for comfort? Vice's desperation for clicks manifests as intentional foolishness, and I feel sorry for anyone who believes this nonsense. Story 85. Oh no, my partner wants to express his inner thoughts and emotional insecurities, and I am expected to help him work through these issues? The horror. Story 86. I think some of the comments are oversimplifying this. My partner is not my therapist, unlike someone here with a lot of upvotes who asserted your partner should be. My therapist is my therapist. She helps me work through deep issues, develop coping mechanisms, and be a better partner. My partner is not my emotional dumping ground to pour my problems onto and expect him to carry that burden or fix the problem. He doesn't help me identify my issues, develop healing strategies, change my behavior patterns, or challenge previously held beliefs. That's what my therapist is for. After therapy, my partner asks, "How is therapy?" And I get to share what we've been working on, how I believe my behavior patterns impact our relationship, and the work I'm doing to change that for the better. He hugs me, kisses me, tells me he loves me, and sometimes provides feedback on what I shared. If it was a hard therapy session, he goes out of his way to make sure I know he loves me, supports me, is proud of me, and is there if I want to vent. That is emotional support. At no point is he trying to fix me or do the inner work for me. My ex had deep childhood trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder from war. He would tell me about it, which was good, but he used it as an excuse during conflict, which was not good. He sought no additional therapy or psychological help, which led to repetition of the same patterns. This is really bad and kind of what I believe to be the point of this article. It is not a woman's job or any partner's job to fix you. It is your job to fix yourself and hope the right person appreciates your effort enough to support you while you do so. Story 87. That is literally the same thing we do for them. Yes, it is exhausting. We just say, "Oh well, gotta do what I gotta do because I love her." Story 88. All I can say is it is very hard to find a male therapist or psychologist. Women often seem to feel uncomfortable with men during therapy in my experience. Story 89. What do I think about this article from Vice? I'll stop you there. Vice may have once had some journalistic integrity. For a long time, Vice has been completely garbage. Just look at the Anna Valens articles on VTubers and that whole situation, including how they published that content and how long and how bad things had to get for them to consider taking anything down, to see how far they have fallen. Vice wishes they were a third-rate knockoff of what the National Enquirer knockoffs once were. I suspect they conveniently missed the whole part about men listening to their partners while women vent, and the whole issue of men having to manage women's often volatile emotions. He is often expected to be more of an emotional support than just a sometimes crutch. Story 90. Some men have started opening up more, which is good. But too often, that openness is shared with the person they are sleeping with instead of a friend or a therapist. Vulnerability without boundaries can feel more like a burden than a breakthrough. Yes, how dare he confide more in the person he loves and trusts. Reading further to The Guardian and the study they cite, it becomes even more disappointing. The Guardian author seems biased. She terms being emotionally supportive of your partner as man-keeping and states, "Man-keeping is a real thing. Men do not man-keep, women man-keep." How so? Increasingly, the dynamic in a heterosexual relationship seems to be that a woman coaches her partner through his problems. Really? Men never talk their partners through their problems? It is only one way. Does that align with your real-life experience? Because it does not apply to mine. The study is interesting in that the male loneliness epidemic is only considered a problem because of how it affects women. It reminds me of when some female politicians said that women suffered the most in war from the effects of male trauma, injuries, and death. Story 91. Just more man-hating bait. As always, it is unconditional support for women and strictly enforced rules for men. Story 92. Honestly, I think it is more often the case that a man is the therapist or emotional support for a woman in the relationship than the other way around. Mature women dealing with men who are emotionally stunted or repressed are rarer in my experience than the societally normalized dynamic we see daily, where women can be as emotionally unstable as they want, and men are expected to just deal with it, as it is attributed to women being women and men needing to be the rock. Most women tend to greatly overestimate their own emotional maturity and intelligence because they conflate it with being emotionally expressive. These are not the same thing. Being unfiltered about your own feelings is not the same as understanding them and their roots, being able to regulate them, communicating them in healthy ways, being sensitive to other people's feelings, and being a safe space for others to share their feelings with you. However, 90% of women are sure it is only men who are the problem, believing they are emotionally enlightened beings having to tolerate men, when very often it is the opposite. Story 93, M31 here. I think the article is quite sensible, and most people here are putting words in the author's mouth. On the topic of emotional crutch, she's not criticizing men for opening up and looking for emotional support in their female partners. She's criticizing men who do that exclusively with their partner, not sharing it with friends. The issue of being their free therapist is an old discussion that comes especially from the fact that, in some cases, men refuse to see a therapist but still burden solely their partner with their whole emotional baggage. I don't think this is a healthy, balanced relationship. I wouldn't be able to be the sole emotional outlet of my wife. It would be too much. Thank God she has a balanced life and friends and family with whom she opens up as well. Story 94. I ended my last relationship this way. I was going through a difficult time for a long period. I changed careers and struggled for a couple of years, trying to improve our financial situation permanently. During this time, I was completely open with my then-girlfriend. I thought I was just venting and communicating, but my negativity was taking a toll on her. I was clearly struggling and completely miserable. I hated every part of my life except for her. I essentially shared all my trauma with this woman throughout that time. She didn't want to tell me that my misery was affecting her as well because she thought it would make me feel even more stressed. So she kept it to herself. Eventually, my constant negativity became too much, and she fell out of love with me. I treated her like a therapist. She had her own problems, and I burdened her with mine. Your partner is not there to carry 100% of your emotional weight. They have their own issues to manage. Healthy communication is important, but if all you discuss is how much you dislike your job, life, or financial situation, your partner is not going to enjoy spending time with you. Story 95. I think that if those women are not ready to hear about their partner's emotions, then maybe they are not ready for an adult relationship. Seriously though, I have grown up reading countless articles by women lamenting the fact that the men in their lives will not open up and often choose to take their own lives rather than express their emotions. Now, apparently younger men are talking about emotions and are being told to be quiet. I cannot express how strongly I disagree with the falsehood society imposes on people, so this will have to suffice. Story 96. In my experience, women are far more likely to encourage their boyfriends to talk about their feelings than the other way around. Story 97. Women are the emotionally intelligent sex. Seriously, if you cannot be emotionally supportive of your partner, then you should not be in a relationship. That is the whole deal. This applies to both genders. Most men are no stranger to fulfilling that role for their partner, so it is perfectly reasonable for them to expect the same in return. Story 98. Every person in the world forces their partner to be their professional therapist and cannot function without constant and ongoing emotional support. Nuance and compatibility do not exist. Story 99. Behind every strong man is an even stronger woman who believes in him even when he cannot believe in himself. His Rocky had Adrian. Barack Obama has Michelle Obama. Jay-Z has Beyonce. Kanye has Kim. Story 100. This is the most misguided opinion I have heard so far. Family is meant to be there for each other. Having them to talk through things and share certain burdens is what defines a good relationship. The lack of this trust is a major reason many people seek therapy and is a significant contributor to divorces. This sounds like another opinion piece from someone who has struggled to build a family and is giving advice to others to avoid feeling alone and miserable. Story 101. I think it will upset a lot of people in this subreddit, but it is honestly pretty true. Men do not talk about their struggles as much with their friends, so oftentimes the woman they are dating becomes their only emotional outlet, which is a lot to put on one person. Your partner cannot be your entire support network. They should obviously be an integral part of it, but not the entire thing. And yes, these are obviously generalizations and do not apply in every case. Story 102. I think it is because men do not tend to have friends with whom they can be genuinely vulnerable. It is normal to rely on your partner for emotional support, but if you go your entire life without processing deep emotional issues, it can be quite heavy. It would be a lot to place on a partner. I believe men can benefit from gaining better emotional understanding and learning to process where their feelings are coming from. This will greatly improve everyday emotional wellness and communication. Story 103. When someone is accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression is not a truism. It is a confession by progressives. Men being more open with their troubles does not necessarily mean women supporting men emotionally, which is something they are clearly unaccustomed to. Inventing cutesy nonsense like man-keeping is just a way to enforce misandrous gender roles but make it feel like progress. Story 104. Unless men use their fist, death threat, or gun, how could men force their partners? So foolish articles. Most women use men as emotional supports. That is a fact. Story 105. I have not read the article, but I have heard women refer to this as uncompensated emotional labor. It is a red flag for a woman to talk about men this way, but in some ways I agree. Men should save their deep issues for therapists, ministers, or close trusted friends. It is not healthy, especially for a man, to casually share everything with everyone. Even with friends, it should be a two-way street. With partners, women can be turned off by a man's insecurities, depending on the context and how it is expressed. Story 106. Vice and similar publications are just nonsense. They also say men do not want to open up and talk to anyone, including their significant others, and wonder why not. The supposed cause is toxic masculinity. Story 107. I dislike this article because it incites anger unnecessarily. This is a complex issue that the author explains in an oversimplified way. Many men today are better. For example, more fathers are changing their children's diapers. These small actions, long overdue, show that men are improving. The article should focus on women avoiding the traditional idea of a man, rather than portraying all men as bad. Story 108. It is a common assumption that women are not looking for a relationship because of too much emotional labor. The survey does not say that. It says they have other priorities. I would assume women are not actively seeking dates or a relationship as much because men will approach them. They do not need to seek it out. Story 109. My wife is not very helpful as support, and that is fine. However, if I talk about my stress, then I have to deal with her stress about my stress. No, it is fine. I will deal with it myself. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.